Hi, and welcome back to Football Made Simple. Thomas Tuchel's Chelsea prepared to host Rodgers' Leicester in a crucial league match. A loss for either side would mean Champions League qualification was no longer in their hands and would instead be dependent on Liverpool's results. And in the end, Chelsea came out 2-1 winners thanks to Rudiger and Jorginho, whilst Iheanacho scored the consolation. The XG showed that Chelsea created much more, 2.86 to 0.83. The XG time map shows that from start to finish, Chelsea were the chief goal threat. But what tactics did both managers use? Let's take a look. Both managers opted for the back three, as you can see on the OneFootball app. OneFootball is sponsoring this video, and it is the best football app around, giving you match updates and formations like this, in addition to news, stats and so much more. And the best part is, you can get it absolutely free through the link in the description below. Let's first look at Chelsea in possession as they dominated the ball. With the score at 0-0, Leicester didn't really look to press high from the goal kick, allowing Chelsea to play out comfortably. But once behind, they began to press higher, and Chelsea were usually still able to play out down the right hand side, as James moved from right centre back to right back, allowing Silva and Rudiger to split wide. And crucially, for most of these phases, Azpilicueta would have pushed higher up as James would be in the right back position. So, if Leicester's wing back looked to press James, Azpilicueta could receive. If he instead stayed deeper on Azpilicueta, James could then receive in this right back slot. But for the goal, Chelsea's build-up shape wasn't to its usual standard. Silva is much narrower, and perhaps if he had been wider, James would have moved higher up the pitch. Instead, James is deep, offering the width. But also note that Azpilicueta has also stayed deep and in close proximity. So Thomas from left wing back can effectively shut down these two men, whereas before he had the dilemma of picking who to press. So Chelsea can't use the wide combination and have to go central instead to an under pressure KOVACIC who loses the ball, and Ndidi feeds Iheanacho, who is in space as Rudiger had shifted wide left. He's then able to pull off the first time finish. But in open play, Chelsea could manipulate Leicester in a few ways. Early on and late on, Leicester pressed man-to-man high up, with their wide forwards looking to stop any progress from Rudiger and James, whilst Tielemans and Ndidi would look to press the pivots. The potential runs of WERNER in behind created a ton of room between the lines, whilst Pulisic would join him to pin the centre-backs deeper. Time and again, Mount could then receive in acres of space and look to play a runner into a good position even when a Leicester centre-back had looked to close him down. When Conte was on the pitch, with Maddison pressing James, he was often able to move into this right-hand position, as Azpilicueta would be much higher up trying to tie up Thomas. But if Thomas did look to press Conte, Azpilicueta would then be the free man to receive down the flanks. But more commonly, it was Leicester's pivots who would come across to cover, which would leave Mount in even more space on the wrong side of the pivot. This even leads to one of Werner's disallowed goals. Maddison is high pressing James and Conte has moved wide right, and Thomas looks to press Conte and leaves Azpilicueta as the free man. Conte is able to play a 1-2 with the free Azpilicueta, and he is now the wrong side of Thomas. And because Soyuncu had to cover for Thomas in this left wing back position, Ndidi has dropped into the back line and Tielemans is also out of position. As a result, Conte can drive forward unchallenged and Mount has plenty of room on the far side, and when he receives, he plays the first time ball into WERNER, who is well offside. So, mid-game, Leicester did look to adapt by dropping into a deeper 5-4-1 shape, and importantly, PEREZ and Maddison would often pick up Chelsea's pivots, meaning that Tielemans and Ndidi could remain deeper and not allow Mount any space between the lines. This did allow Chelsea's centre-backs to have more time on the ball, but of course this is a less dangerous situation than allowing Chelsea time between the lines instead. The problem with this is when Leicester won the ball back, they had no target to hit as Vardy was so deep. In addition, with Chelsea having so many men high up and in close proximity, when they did lose the ball, they could counter-press quickly to win the ball back high up or force Leicester into an aimless long ball. This is shown by an extremely low passes per defensive action of just under 7. But let's touch on Leicester in possession. They used a similar shape to Chelsea on the build-up, with the two centre-backs splitting wide and Castagna moving to right back. But Chelsea were much more concerned with defending the centre, using two forwards to press the centre-backs whilst Mount moved narrow and one of the pivots pushed high. This allowed Chelsea to cover the Leicester pivots whilst having a spare man to sweep up anything that comes between the lines, which is something that Leicester didn't have in their shape. In addition, when PEREZ or Maddison did drop deeper to pick up the ball, Rudiger and James were much more aggressive in following their men deep and not giving them any room to turn. So, central progression was almost impossible for Leicester. Instead, Leicester would often look to find the wide men, and Soyuncu and Castagna were crucial to the build-up for Leicester. When they received the ball, Chelsea's forwards were often hard-working and looked to shift across to stop their progression forwards. But they weren't always able to do this, and often, Leicester's wide centre-backs could drive forward into great positions and would look to draw Chelsea's defenders to open up room for a man higher up the pitch. We see an example of this. Chelsea's front two are narrow with Mount deep and KOVACIC is helping the press. PEREZ is looking to drop deep, but Rudiger has come deep with him, so there are no central options open. The wide centre-back is the only free man. He receives and pushes high into the space, and then draws Rudiger, which makes space for PEREZ to run into, and he puts in a decent cross. Overall though the performance was dominant, Chelsea were almost made to pay for being wasteful near the end. Leicester are now dependent on results elsewhere in order to qualify for the Champions League, a disappointing second half of the season, similar to last season. But what did you make of the match? Drop it down below and let me know who you think will qualify for the Champions League. And if you want even more content whilst helping to support the channel, consider checking out my Patreon at patreon.com/footballmadesimple. You'll get early access to videos, exclusive videos, as well as access to the upcoming FMS video podcast. And a special thanks to Ryan Pork, Happy Rock, Philip, Jagustin, and Asra Fauzi for their support on the Patreon Ultra tier. But that's all for today, and remember, keep it simple.